If you didn't do that, if you adopted the approach which suggested there, you just let the banks manage their own crisis situation, there is one slight technical problem there as well. That the banks are technically insolvent at the moment in the sense that their liabilities are much bigger than their assets. And the technical issue for the Irish taxpayer is that we're guaranteeing the liabilities of the Irish banking system through the deposit guarantee scheme. So you cannot do that. So I think it is the correct approach to set up this National Asset Management Agency to take the loans off the banks, manage the way through the situation. It's a little bit like, of course, asking a carryman for direction someplace. Well, I wouldn't be starting here. It is not a good situation to be in, and there is no outcome. There's no good outcome out of this. It's going to be a painful process. What we have to do is look for the least worst way out of this crisis, and I think government is on track with that. The question is, will it involve full nationalisation or not? I don't think that really matters. I do think there's a high probability it will happen, but I don't think it really matters at the end of the day. The important thing is that bank balance sheets are repaired as quickly as possible in order to facilitate banks getting back into the business of lending money. And that is a situation that they cannot fulfil at the moment because of the damage to their balance sheets.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask, going back to the last point about public sector, and we're seeing two strikes now today, one unofficial, the bus drivers, and the taxi strike. But in relation to the public sector, how likely is it that they think they're going to go on board in terms of making an effort for the country to get out of this? I say the 149 people against them in that room last week, but also public sector workers who are going to take up anything like that. How do you think that they're going to come on board without non-strikes happening?
Well, it's going to be extremely difficult. People have argued that the big benefit of social partnership was that it reduced strikes across the economy. But it's very easy to reduce strikes if you give the unions everything they want, which is effectively what we did with the public sector unions. I believe that social partnership just became a vehicle for public sector unions in recent years, and the benchmarking of public sector pay was, to me, the greatest manifestation of that situation. So you could give the public sector unions everything they want now. Don't cut public sector pay, abolish the pension levy. That would ensure, and do not engage in reform of the public sector, that would ensure that you don't get any strikes in the public sector. But is that a desirable outcome? At the end of the day, I think we have to make the hard decisions, and if we get public sector strikes along the way, so be it. But we have to stand firm, because at the end of the day, if we do not address these problems, we have a fundamental long-term structural problem that will haunt the economy for decades to come. So it is going to be a very difficult path out of this. You will get further public sector strikes of the type we're seeing at the moment. I think there is an inevitability about that, but I think we have to press ahead with it. It's funny, I suggested last November a 10% pay cut for earnings over 50,000 in the public sector. I got an incredibly negative reaction to that, incredibly negative, personal vitriol the lot. Okay, but I suspect most public sector workers today would have preferred that outcome than the public sector levy that was introduced in January, which in my view was not the way to address the problem. I think the pay cut day one would have been a much more desirable outcome, but the government and the trade unions were not prepared to contemplate public sector pay cuts. You look at what's happening in the private sector, that's exactly what's happening, has been happening for quite some time now. You need to apply that to the public sector as well.
Peter Sullivan pointed out last week that the private sector wage restraints and reaction to the labour market and so on, and market mechanisms are adjusting pretty good, pretty well in Ireland currently. Surely it's not rocket science from a public policy point of view to reduce competition versus private sector issues versus public sector bodies that talk about outsourcing of business processes, administration, wages, so on and so forth, back office situations to get efficiencies in the public sector. Is there any sign of that? Is there any sign of that from
No.
the
No. It's, there's not actually, to be honest, it could be thrown at me, and if there were public sector unions here in the audience, it'd be thrown at me. It's very easy to stand up and barrack the public sector, blame them for everything. You see, nobody is blaming the public sector. The fact is, the public sector is a sheltered part of the economy. It will not reform itself without external influence. The private sector is not sheltered. Most of you, if not all, are living in the private sector. We've seen the adjustment that's happened over the last 12 months. That is going to continue. Wages are being cut, workers are being let go, working hours are being cut back, and so on. So the market is forcing that adjustment. In the sheltered sector, the market does not force that adjustment, so external influence has to be brought to bear. So it's not targeting the public sector per se. It's just targeting the overall system. And there are very obvious outcomes, such as you mentioned, that they're not rocket science, they make huge sense, but they require strong political leadership to deliver. And that, to me, is the problem. Our political leadership over the last decade has not stood up to public sector unions. I wrote this time last year, when Bertie Ahern stepped down, that his ability to keep social partnership alive was the greatest negative indictment of his period in office, rather than, as some people were arguing, how good he was at keeping social partnership alive. I don't think that keeping the social partnership process on track was actually in the best interest of the economy. And I'm not rewriting history. I'm not saying in hindsight. Since 1998, I've been hugely critical of the social partnership process. Personally, I went absolutely berserk when I saw the benchmarking awards that were introduced 3 or 4 years ago. So that agenda has to be taken on.
Thanks very much, Jim.
Okay, thank you very much.
I suspect we could have spent the morning taking questions for Jim, but I now have the onerous task of picking out 5 business cards. Just in the interest of time, the winners of the HSBC Lions jerseys are Andrew Gearan from Andrew Gearan & Associates, Imelda McSweeney, who's a financial consultant, John Finn, who's the Managing Director of Treasury Solutions, Anne-Marie O'Sullivan from the Empire H&A Marketing, and Owen Quinlan from Bank of Scotland. So you can collect the jerseys later.
Okay, just very quickly, conscious it's gone past time. I'm sure you're anxious to get away. Just again to thank the Irish Examiner for their support, or continuing support of our business breakfast. Can I thank Roland from Shared Visions. This event is being webcast and will also be available on our website later on today, as will Jim's presentation. Just very quickly to mention a few upcoming events for you. On the 14th of May, we have a business after hours networking event at the Atrium Business Centre in Blackpool. Great opportunity to get out there, make some new contacts, develop some business leads, and again, that's the 14th of May. Our next breakfast briefing is on the 3rd of June. Paul Schultz, the new Chief Executive of Air Aran, will be our guest speaker on that occasion. And SME Week, the first European SME Week is coming up shortly as well, and we have a number of events which should be of interest. We have an expert workshop on innovation, which is very, very important, particularly now for SME companies. Sometimes the perception is that innovation is more about larger companies, but it's something that SMEs certainly need to take into consideration. And tendering and public procurement as well is a very important area at the moment, and we've got an event on the 13th of May titled Love Me Tender. So a bit cheesy, but there you go. So with that, thank you all very much for taking the time this morning. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.